My name is Frank Sullivan. I'm 74 years old. For 41 years, I ran a small auto shop outside Denver, fixing transmissions and brakes for anybody who walked through my door. I raised one son in the house on Willow Creek Lane. I buried my wife from that house. I thought I'd die there too. My son had other plans. Margaret passed 2 years ago, on a cold February morning, in the bedroom we'd shared for 39 years. After the funeral, the house felt too big and too quiet for one old man. Some mornings I still made coffee for two before I caught myself. About 6 months in, my son Kevin showed up with his wife Denise, and a suggestion that sounded, at the time, like the kindest offer I'd had in years. "Move in with you, Dad. Help you out. Save on rent while we save for our own place." I said yes before he finished the sentence. For a while, it really did feel like a blessing. Denise cooked most nights. Kevin fixed the gutters without being asked. We watched football the way we used to when he was a boy. I told my neighbor Harold I was the luckiest old man in Colorado. I had no idea the man smiling across my dinner table was already counting down the days until the house belonged to somebody else. By the 6th month, small things started shifting. The kind you brush off because you don't want to know what they mean. Denise started calling it our place on the phone with her sister. She swapped Margaret's curtains without asking. Kevin started asking about my pension, my savings, whether the house was paid off. It was. Free and clear since 2009. A son should know these things, I told myself. Then one night at dinner he mentioned a college friend who'd just sold his inherited house in Aurora for close to $900,000. And he looked around my kitchen in a way that made the back of my neck go cold. Denise started having a realtor friend named Patricia over for coffee. I later learned Patricia had already priced my house without my knowledge. Around the 8th month, Kevin started saying I was forgetting things, even when I hadn't. I misplaced my reading glasses one Tuesday, same as I always had, and by dinner he was telling Denise across the table, like I wasn't sitting right there, that he was getting worried about my memory. He started driving me to appointments I'd handled myself for 50 years, sitting in the room asking my doctor pointed questions about cognitive decline. Denise started leaving brochures on the counter, soft lighting, smiling gray-haired actors, names like Golden Meadows and Peaceful Pines. Just for research, Frank, in case we ever need it down the road. Down the road, that was her phrase. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be the paranoid old man. But some part of me, the part that spent 41 years reading people who lied to my face about their car trouble, started paying very close attention. Then came the Thursday in April. I'd gone out to the garage for an old socket wrench when I heard Kevin's voice through the door, low and fast, the voice of a man who thinks he's alone. The doctor already said his memory is declining. That's on record now. That's what we need. Once we get him into Golden Meadows, the paperwork practically signs itself. Patricia already ran the numbers. Right around $890,000 for the house. Maybe more if we list before fall. That covers his care and leaves plenty left over for us. Then Denise said something I couldn't hear, and Kevin laughed. He has to go, Denise. It's not personal. It's just what makes sense for everybody. He has to go. I stood in that garage doorway for what felt like an hour. It was probably 2 minutes. I set the wrench down as quiet as I'd picked it up, walked back through the yard, and sat on the porch steps in the April sun like nothing had happened, even though everything had. My first instinct was to walk into that kitchen and ask my son what kind of man says he has to go about his own father, like I was a couch nobody wanted anymore. I didn't. 41 years running a business teaches you something more useful than fixing transmissions. How to keep your face calm while somebody lies to you, so you can find out exactly what they're planning before you say a single word. So that night, I ate Denise's pot roast and asked Kevin how work was going, same as always. I didn't sleep, not 1 minute. I lay there going over every polite comment about those brochures, every sudden doctor's appointment, every question about my pension, and it all lined up now like a puzzle I'd been too trusting to see the shape of. Somewhere around 3 in the morning I made a decision. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to accuse anybody. I was going to find out exactly where I stood before they got the chance to make a move against me. The following Monday, I told Kevin I had a doctor's appointment across town and drove myself there in my old F-150. Instead, I went to see a lawyer named Grace Whitman, above a bakery on Colfax Avenue. I told her everything. The phone call, the brochures, the questions about my finances. She pulled up the county records right there. Mr. Sullivan, this house is deeded solely in your name. No one can sell it, admit you anywhere, or touch a dollar of your money without your consent, unless you've signed something. Then she asked if Kevin had asked me to sign anything lately. Anything he'd called insurance paperwork. I remembered instantly. A stack of papers Kevin had left on the kitchen table 2 weeks earlier, telling me they were updated insurance documents for the house. I hadn't signed them yet. I don't sign anything without my glasses and a clear head. I brought them to Grace 3 days later. They weren't insurance forms. They were a durable power of attorney, handing Kevin full control of my finances, my health care, and my home. I never signed it, but finding it changed something in me. I wasn't just an old man being talked about behind his back anymore. I was a man whose own son had tried to trick him into signing away his life over paperwork labeled to look boring. Grace recommended a realtor she trusted, a sharp young woman named Carla Nguyen, out of an office in Cherry Creek, known for moving houses fast and quiet. I met her at a coffee shop 2 miles from the house, paid cash, and told her I wanted to sell without my son or his wife knowing, until it was already done. She didn't ask why, she just nodded, like she'd heard it before. My neighborhood was hot enough that a house like mine, 4 bedrooms, updated kitchen, 1/3 of an acre, could bring close to $900,000 if we moved fast. I opened a new account at a credit union Kevin didn't know existed, redirected my mail to a P.O. box, and met Carla every Thursday while Kevin and Denise thought I was at physical therapy. For the first time in months, I felt like I was holding the cards again. To keep them relaxed, I let them take me on a tour of Golden Meadows. I walked those hallways, nodded at the activities calendar, told the coordinator the dining room looked lovely, all while having no intention of ever living there. Kevin looked so pleased afterward, telling Denise on speakerphone that Dad seemed really open to it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Meanwhile, Carla listed my house privately, off the big sites, marketed only through a small network of serious buyers. Within 9 days we had 3 offers. The best came from a young couple, Mark and Priya Anderson, expecting their first baby, who fell in love with the backyard where Kevin used to play catch with me 40 years earlier. $890,000, all cash, flexible closing, no contingencies. I sat in Carla's office and signed with a hand steadier than I expected, thinking about my son's voice in that garage doorway. Well, Kevin, somebody does have to go. Turns out, it isn't going to be me. 2 weeks after I signed, Kevin came home glowing. His company was sending him and Denise to a conference in Chicago for 8 days, all expenses paid. It's actually perfect timing, Dad, he told me over dinner. While we're gone, think more about Golden Meadows. Maybe put down a deposit. I told him I'd think about it. Same calm voice I'd been using for weeks. While inside, I was doing the math. Closing could happen in as little as 12 days once both sides signed off. And the Andersons, pre-approved and eager, were ready the moment I gave the word. They left for the airport on a Sunday morning, Denise reminding me 3 times to water her orchids. I waved from the porch, and the second Kevin's car turned the corner and disappeared, I called Carla and told her one thing. Move the closing date up. Do it this week, before they ever get the chance to come home and stop it. The closing happened on a Wednesday, 4 days into their trip, in a small conference room downtown. Mark and Priya sat across from me, her hand resting on her belly, both of them practically bouncing about raising their child in that backyard. I signed page after page, feeling lighter with every signature, and when it was done, Carla handed me a check for $890,000, minus fees, more money than I'd ever seen in one place in my life. I'd already found my new home myself, a bright, independent living condo in Golden, Colorado, mountain views out every window, a woodworking shop in the basement. Nobody chose it for me off a brochure. I chose it, walked through it, paid for it in cash, signed my own lease. I spent that Wednesday and Thursday with 2 movers I'd hired weeks in advance, packing 40 years of my life. Margaret's china, my father's old workbench, the photographs off the walls, and left the rest for the new owners, who were glad to take the furniture off my hands. By Thursday evening, the house on Willow Creek Lane belonged completely to Mark and Priya Anderson. The locks had been changed. I sat in my new living room in Golden, watching the sun go down behind the mountains, feeling more peace than I had in over a year. Before I left, I sat at the kitchen table, where Margaret and I had eaten breakfast for 39 years, and wrote one last letter, not to be cruel, just to be honest. I taped it to the front door, right where I knew Kevin's key would fail to turn. I told him I knew everything. I'd been standing in that garage in April when he told Denise on the phone that I had to go, that he'd talked about $890,000 like it was already spent. I told him the house had been sold, fair and legal, to a young family who deserved it more than two people who'd spent a year planning how to put their own father away. I told him I wasn't angry anymore, just disappointed in a way that ran deeper than anger. I told him not to bother with the old numbers since I'd closed those accounts, but that I'd answer if he ever called to say he was sorry and meant it. I signed it the way I'd signed every card since he was 7 years old. Love, Dad. Then I locked the door for the last time and drove away without looking back. Kevin told me later, though I didn't hear it from him for weeks, that he and Denise pulled into the driveway that Sunday evening, still tan from the trip, Denise already talking about her orchids. He walked up with his key, same as 10,000 times before, and it wouldn't turn. He thought it was jammed. That's when Priya Anderson opened the door from the inside, holding her newborn daughter, asking who he was and why he was trying to get into her house. My neighbor Harold watched the whole thing from his porch. He said Kevin froze on the steps before noticing the envelope taped by the doorframe. Denise read it first, standing on the lawn in the fading light, her hands starting to shake halfway through. Kevin grabbed it from her when she couldn't finish, read the rest himself, and that's when the screaming started, loud enough that 3 neighbors came out to watch. Harold said Denise dropped to her knees on the grass. Kevin just stood there holding that letter, staring at a house that no longer held a single thing that belonged to him, in front of a family he'd never met, on a street he thought he'd own free and clear within months. My phone started ringing 4 minutes later. I didn't answer, not that night. He called 31 times over the next 3 days. I let everyone go to voicemail, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted him to sit with the feeling he'd been so ready to hand me. On the 4th day, sitting on my new balcony as the mountains turned orange, I finally picked up. His voice cracked the second I said hello. "Dad, please. We didn't mean it like that. We can fix this. Just tell us where you are." I let him talk himself through the apologies, the excuses about stress and money and things getting away from them. When he finally stopped, I told him the truth, plainly. I'd heard every word of that call in April. I knew about the power of attorney disguised as insurance forms. I knew exactly what Golden Meadows and $890,000 had meant to him for months before I ever said a word. I told him I wasn't going to yell, because he was still my son and I still loved him. But that love didn't mean I owed him a house I'd worked 41 years to pay off, especially not after he decided on his own that I had to go. I told him I was happy, genuinely, in a place I'd chosen myself, surrounded by people my own age who respected me, instead of planning around me. Before I hung up, I told him the door wasn't closed forever, but it would only open again when he was ready to see me as his father, and not as $890,000 standing in his way. I set the phone down beside my coffee and looked out at those mountains one more time, feeling, for the first time in longer than I could remember, completely and finally at peace.